I'm Hunter, a historian with a spine held together by stubbornness and 2 old rugby injuries. On September 28th at 6:42 a.m., I was hunched over my oak desk, sharpening my notes for Beyond the Horizon, miscalculations that changed the world. I had a budget spreadsheet open. $180 to rent the hall projector, $64.20 for programs, $4.75 for black coffee that tasted like ship tar. I'd rehearsed a story of maps that lied and men who sailed anyway. Then my phone buzzed. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. A headline: Archaeologist Leo unveils $7 million Taino ceremonial disc. Private ownership confirmed. Leo is my son. My ungrateful, brilliant, impatient son. The article quoted him like a politician at harvest time. He bragged about a solo effort, hinted at an independent deed, proving his right to keep the artifact, an exquisitely carved disc of petroglyphs I had first pointed him toward years ago, when I traced a line of letters in a missionary's diary from 1511 to a limestone sinkhole in the interior. I didn't crow then. I was content to watch him take the field I'd never had the muscle for. But private ownership? The artifact belonged in the museum, in the quiet air between glass and light, not in his apartment beside a bottle of bourbon. I called him. He declined. Then he texted, "Busy, Dad. Donor breakfast. Big day." Donor. The word clanged. I dialed my sister, Sadie, the only person whose pulse changes when mine does. "I smell smoke," she said without a low. Sadie, retired records clerk who treats filing cabinets like cathedral organs. "Come by," I told her. "Bring a crowbar for old secrets." By 9:10, she was in my kitchen with a tote bag, a thermos, and that sharp look that makes liars blink. "What's he got?" she asked. "An artifact worth $7 million, and a story that's worth more." I slid over the article. The high-gloss photo of the disc, its spiral incisions like fingerprints of tidewater, and apparently a deed. Sadie's eyebrows climbed the way gulls ride a thermal. Deed to what? Air? Bones of people who didn't sign anything. She set down her thermos. If he's waiving paperwork, someone printed it. I opened my lecture folder. Columbus Day was 2 weeks out. I decided on a new thesis. Discovery isn't a hero raising a flag. It's a ledger of debts. I wrote the first line. October 13th is for the maps we drew wrong and the people we owed. My pen trembled. I thought of Leo at 9, tracing coast with a blue crayon, asking if dragons live at the edge of paper. I thought of him at 33, stubble like a failed field survey, shaking dust from his boots onto my rug. Sadie pulled a small safe from her tote, the portable one she keeps like a purse. "You kept the letters from Dr. Riley?" she asked. I nodded. Riley, my late mentor, who taught me that archives aren't dead, just sleeping. We spun the dial. Inside, a stack bound with green twine, edges foxed, dated 1987 to 1993. In them, Riley and I had traced references to the round face of the god who sees at night, and sketched coordinates that would later lead Leo, my Leo, to his sinkhole. In my own hand I'd written, December 18th, suggest site to Leo when he finishes field school. Keep reading, Sadie urged. We'll need dates. She speaks in timestamps. I thumbed through ink and ghosts until I found it. March 4th, 1991. My letter to Riley, attaching a notation copied from an Avery map, Avery. The cartographer, not the student cave mouth lines with Orion on spring, equinox. Leo hadn't stumbled on anything. He'd been handed a compass. My phone buzzed again, this time a calendar invite. October 13th, 11 a.m., City Hall Auditorium. Leo, heritage and ownership, a personal journey. The arrogance made my jaw ache. I imagined the crowd, professors, donors, Kaylee the eager grad who quotes me back to me, from the museum curator with his cautious smile, Julian the journalist who loves scandals. I pictured Leo on stage, sleeves rolled, talking about my find, my papers, and my right. You'll need more than letters, Sadie said, reading my face like a ledger. We'll need provenance, chain of custody, witnesses. Witnesses. I repeated. She smiled fox-like. Riley's estate. And do you remember who notarized your research grant withdrawals in 90 to 91? I didn't. She did. A woman named Kaylee. Older Kaylee, not the student, who still keeps a stamp in a tin, she said. And Finn's donor log. Money leaves footprints. By sundown, I revised the lecture head to toe. Part 1, the lie of possession. Part 2, the cost of truth. I added a slide. $180 projector, $64.20 programs, $0 paid to the ancestors, $7 million temptation tax. I printed the letter's first pages and tucked the originals back into Sadie's safe. We agreed to meet Finn at the museum at 9 a.m. the next day. He'll be skittish, Sadie warned. He's caught between donor checks and ethics. At 11:58 p.m., as I was sealing a manila envelope labeled October 13th, proof, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole, and my stomach fell through the floorboards. Leo stood there, holding a leather tube, and behind him, 2 men in suits. Leo's face in the doorway was all polite surprise, but his eyes darted, calculating. He stepped in without waiting for an invitation. The leather tube clutched like a baton. In a relay, he was desperate to finish. The 2 men in suits followed, neither smiling, both scanning my study like auctioneers evaluating a lot. Dad, Leo began, tone breezy, I thought we should talk before the lecture. His voice had the easy confidence of a man who thinks he owns a room, probably because he believed he owned the artifact, the narrative, and, if he played his cards right, my silence. Sadie appeared from the kitchen, mug in hand. Talk about what? She asked flatly, her eyes narrowing at the suits. Leo hesitated, then nodded to one of them. A thick envelope appeared on my desk. Formal notice of claim, Leo said. I'm consolidating provenance. The disc will remain in my possession for foreseeable future. I picked up the envelope, weighing it, not opening it. Provenance, I repeated. Interesting word. You know, in the 16th century, explorers falsified entire logs to keep competitors away from their routes. Leo's jaw tightened. Dad, this isn't about history. It's about facts. Sadie sipped her coffee. And forged deeds, she added. Those are facts, too. The shorter suit bristled. Mr. Hunter, your son's claim is fully documented. We'd appreciate your cooperation in avoiding unnecessary disputes. My laughter startled them all. Gentlemen, you're standing in a house where every shelf is a dispute I didn't avoid. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch. Leo shifted tactics. Look, Dad, the lecture's going to bring attention. If you back me publicly, we both win. I'll even credit your research notes. The arrogance was breathtaking. My notes, my letters, were the foundation of his discovery, and he was offering me a footnote in exchange for surrender. Sadie set her mug down hard enough to make them all flinch. Hunter, show him the Orion alignment letter, she said quietly. Leo's eyes flickered. He remembered it. The spring equinox, the cave mouth, the coordinates. Proof that the trail began with me. I opened the top drawer, my fingers brushing the green twine stack. Then I stopped. Not yet. Timing was everything in history and in war. You'll get your answer October 13th. I said. Leo frowned. That's the lecture. Exactly. The taller suit leaned in. Mr. Hunter, threats. I held up a hand. Not a threat, an invitation. They left 5 minutes later. Tension following him out the door. Sadie exhaled. You're going to gut him in front of the entire academic community. I closed the drawer slowly. No, Sadie, I'm going to make him gut himself. That night, while the rain hammered the roof, I rewrote my lecture slides. By the time I was done, the artifact wasn't just a disc. It was a mirror. And on Columbus Day, I'd make sure my son saw exactly what was staring back at him. Only one thing worried me. At 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed with a block number. I answered. A voice I didn't recognize said, Hunter, stop digging, or you'll be buried with your own evidence. The blocked call left a shadow in my thoughts that refused to clear with morning coffee. I've received crank threats before, occupational hazard of exposing historical frauds. But this one had a different weight. It wasn't a bluff from an angry amateur. It was a warning from someone who knew exactly what I had in my hands. By 8 a.m., Sadie and I were at the museum, waiting for Finn, the curator. He was the one person in town who could confirm the artifact's proper chain of custody. He arrived looking like he'd aged overnight, shirt wrinkled, hair mussed. "Hunter," he greeted cautiously, "I can't be seen meeting with you about this." "Then let's make it quick," Sadie said, sliding the top letter from the green twine stack across the table. "Read the date." Finn's eyes moved over the faded ink. March 4th, 1991. This is impossible. These coordinates are the same ones on Leo's submission documents. "Exactly," I said, "and I wrote them decades before Leo set foot near that sinkhole." Finn rubbed his temple. "If this gets out, the acquisition committee will have to void his claim. The disc will revert to the State Museum." Sadie leaned forward. "And if it doesn't get out?" His hesitation was answer enough. Donor politics, reputation, the museum's fragile funding. All of it hung over his head. "I'll need more than this letter," he admitted. "Something indisputable." That was when Sadie pulled out Riley's final note, the one with his own map sketch. Finn paled. "This is a direct link between your research and the fine site. If the board sees this..." "They will," I interrupted, "on Columbus Day, in front of every scholar, journalist, and donor in the hall." Finn looked from me to Sadie, then back again. "Hunter, you understand Leo won't just take this? He got friends in places that don't care about truth. Let him bring them." I said, "History doesn't bend for bullies." We left the museum with Finn's reluctant promise to safeguard copies in the archives. But as we stepped outside, a black SUV rolled slowly past the curb. The tinted window slid down just far enough for me to see a pair of dark glasses watching us. Sadie caught my arm. "That's the same vehicle that was outside your house last week." I turned to look, but the SUV accelerated, merging into traffic before I could catch the plate. "Hunter," Sadie said, her voice lower than I'd ever heard it, "this isn't just Leo anymore." I nodded, feeling the weight of the blocked call settle deeper into my chest. She was right. An hour later, when I got home, my study door was ajar. Inside, the drawer where I kept Riley's letters was empty. The sight of that empty drawer hit harder than any threat. No broken lock, no sign of forced entry, just absence, deliberate and clean. Whoever had been in my study had time, skill, and the certainty I wouldn't be home. Sadie arrived 10 minutes later, taking one glance at the drawer before muttering a word she usually reserves for corrupt politicians. "Hunter, this is a precision job, not your average smash and grab." I scanned the shelves, my mind racing. They took the originals. "But the copies are safe," she finished for me, "in the museum's restricted archive. Unless Finn decides his job's worth more than the truth." I wanted to believe Finn, but I'd seen the fear in his eyes. A curator's salary can be held hostage by the wrong donor's displeasure. I sat at my desk, thinking back through every recent interaction. Only 3 people knew exactly what the letters were: me, Sadie, and Leo. Sadie leaned against the doorframe. "You know what this means, right?" "That he's panicking." "Or," she countered, "that he's confident enough to escalate." The thought lodged in my chest like a splinter. If Leo believed he could walk into my home and remove evidence without consequence, then he either had protection or he thought I was already beaten. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed Finn. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. Sadie crossed her arms. "If he's gone dark, we need another angle. Who notarized those early research grants of yours?" I remembered then Kaylee, not the student, but the old notary from the county clerk's office. If she still had her logbooks, she could confirm my authorship of those dates and coordinates. We drove to her small bungalow on the edge of town. Kaylee answered in a faded cardigan, still sharp-eyed despite the years. "Hunter? Haven't seen you since your beard was black. I need to know if you still have your records from 90 to 91. I said. She didn't hesitate. "In the hall closet." "Come in." 10 minutes later, I was staring at her neat, looping handwriting in the logbook. March 4th, 1991. Hunter James. Research grant documents. verified and sealed. Kaylee, I said, you may have just saved a piece of history. She smiled faintly. Careful, Hunter. Men who keep history honest usually make enemies. By the time we left, the weight in my chest had eased. Originals or not, I had proof. That relief lasted exactly until I turned the corner onto my street. 2 police cruisers were parked in my driveway, and standing between them, speaking to an officer, was Leo. Leo saw me before I'd even closed the car door. His expression was a carefully arranged mass of concern, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a private satisfaction he couldn't quite hide. "Dad," he called, stepping toward me as if we were allies in some unfolding drama. There's been a situation. One of the officers turned, a young man with a notebook already open. "Mr. Hunter, we've had a report of stolen property." I didn't blink. "From my own house?" Leo gave a sympathetic shrug. "From my office. An irreplaceable artifact, actually. You might have heard of it." The words landed like stones in my gut. He was reversing the narrative. I was no longer the victim of theft. I was the suspect. "Mr. Hunter," the officer continued, "your son has provided documentation of ownership for an item he believes you may have taken without authorization. We'd like to ask a few questions." Sadie moved to my side, her voice low and sharp. "Hunter, don't say a damn thing without counsel." Leo raised his hands in mock innocence. "This doesn't have to get ugly. I just want the disc back where it belongs." "Where it belongs is in a museum," I said evenly, "not in your living room." The older of the 2 officers stepped forward, sensing the tension. "Gentlemen, we're not here to mediate a family dispute. If Mr. Hunter is willing, we'd like to arrange a time to search the premises." I looked past them toward my front door, toward the study that had already been violated once. If they went in now, anything could be found or misplaced to fit Leo's story. "I'll cooperate," I said, "after I've spoken with my attorney." Leo's lips twitched into the faintest smile, as if he'd anticipated that answer. "Of course, but I'd be careful about delaying. In situations like this, hesitation can look like guilt." Sadie's hand tightened on my arm, holding back the retort that burned in my throat. The officers left after taking my statement, promising to follow up. When the cruisers pulled away, Leo lingered at the end of the driveway, hands in his pockets. "October 13th is coming fast, Dad," he said quietly. "Be sure you know which side of history you want to be on." He turned and walked off, the casual stride of someone convinced the game was already his. Inside, I went straight to my desk, checked the hidden compartment only I knew about. The backup drive with digital scans of Riley's letters was still there, untouched. I thought that was my lifeline, until my phone chimed with a new email. No subject line, just one sentence. "Nice copies. Shame if something happened to the originals at the museum." The email burned on my screen, the cursor blinking like a pulse I couldn't calm. No sender listed, no traceable header, just a promise that the originals at the museum were in danger. Sadie read it over my shoulder, her jaw tightening. "Hunter, if they take those 2, all we've got left is Kaylee's logbook, and that alone might not be enough to crush Leo in front of the board." I knew she was right. Finn's silence since yesterday was no longer just about donor pressure. It smelled like fear. Or complicity. We drove straight to the museum, cutting through downtown traffic under a slate-gray sky that threatened rain. When we arrived, Finn's office door was closed. I knocked. No answer. I pushed it open. The desk was clear except for a manila folder. Inside were 3 forms. Transfer custody documents, all signed. All transferring the ceremonial disc from the museum's protective holding to Leo's private collection. The dates were yesterday. My stomach dropped. "He's already done it," I said. Sadie was rifling through the drawers, her hands quick and methodical. "No copies of our letters in here, not even the scans." From behind us, a voice said, "You shouldn't be here." We turned. Finn stood in the doorway, pale and exhausted, his tie loose. "They came last night," he said quietly. "Not Leo people. I don't know who. They said if I didn't sign the transfer, my family would regret it." I took a step toward him. And the letters? His eyes dropped to the floor. Gone. I'm sorry, Hunter. I didn't even see them leave with them. Sadie's voice was ice. So you handed them everything. Finn flinched. You don't understand. These people, they're not playing academic games. You need to drop this. But I couldn't. Not now. We left the museum. The rain starting to fall in fat. Cold drops. In the car, Sadie turned to me. We have one shot left. You put those scans on that backup drive, make multiple encrypted copies, stash them in different places. I nodded, gripping the wheel. And then, she said, we figure out who's pulling Leo's strings. By the time we got back to my house, the rain was pounding. I went straight to my desk drawer, where the backup drive should have been. The compartment was open, empty. On my desk lay a single Polaroid, my living room, taken from inside the house, while I was gone. The Polaroid felt heavier than it should have, the glossy square bending slightly between my fingers. Someone had been in my home again, calm enough to stand in my living room and take a picture, brazen enough to leave it like a calling card. Sadie stared at it, her voice low. They're letting you know they can come and go whenever they want. I set it down, forcing myself to think past the pulse in my ears. If they have the originals and scans, our only leverage is the people who can testify to the chain of research, Kaylee, maybe Riley's old colleagues. Sadie crossed her arms. Hunter, we're running out of allies. If we pull them in, we're putting targets on their backs too. That was a trap. These weren't academic rivals bound by ethics. Whoever was behind Leo was using intimidation as casually as most people use handshakes. I decided to risk it anyway. I called Julian, the investigative journalist I trusted just enough to gamble with. He answered on the third ring. I was wondering when you'd call, he said, as if we'd been playing a long, slow chess game. Word is, your son's about to be the toast of Columbus Day. I've got proof he's a fraud. I told him, but it's slipping through my fingers. Julian's voice sharpened. Meet me tonight. 10 o'clock. Pier 7. And come alone. Sadie frowned when I hung up. That smells like a setup. It also smells like my only chance to get this into the hands of someone who can make noise fast. The rain had slowed by nightfall, but the wind coming off the water cut through my coat. Pier 7 was nearly deserted, the lamplight swaying in long arcs. Julian was there, collar up, hands in his pockets. You've stirred up something ugly, Hunter, he said without preamble. I've heard whispers. Funds moving through offshore accounts, artifact sales that never hit auction houses. Your son's name isn't just in the footnotes. I stepped closer. Can you prove it? He glanced past me, his expression suddenly tightening. We're out of time. A black SUV rolled up the pier, tires hissing on wet wood. Its headlights cut across us, blinding for a moment. Julian's hand closed around my arm. Run. I turned toward the shadows, too late. The rear door of the SUV swung open, and a voice I recognized as the one from that block call said, Hunter, get in. The wind off the pier whipped salt into my mouth as I froze, staring at the open SUV door. The interior was blacker than the night around it, the kind of darkness that felt deliberate. Julian's grip on my arm tightened. Hunter. Stay out of this, the voice interrupted, calm and steady. This isn't your fight, Julian. I could just make out a silhouette in the back seat. Broad shoulders, head tilted like a man appraising livestock. What if I don't get in? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Then we'll come inside your house again, the voice said. And next time, we won't just take pictures. Julian let go of me, his jaw clenched. If you go, you're walking into their court. No rules, no refs. I took a breath and stepped forward. Sometimes the only way to know the size of the enemy is to stand close enough to smell their breath. Inside, the SUV smelled faintly of leather and expensive cigars. The man across from me leaned forward into the spill of light from the pier. His eyes were unreadable, but his smile was small and precise. Your son is valuable to us, he said. He's ambitious, persuasive, and unlike you, he understands a profit in heritage. This isn't heritage, I said. It's theft. His smile didn't change. That word has no meaning in the right circles. He leaned back, folding his hands. You're going to cancel your lecture. Publicly. Announce that Leo's claim is legitimate. Do that, and you'll be left alone. Don't. He let the silence finish the sentence for him. I thought of Sadie, of Kaylee's neat logbook, of Riley's letters scattered into hands that didn't care about the truth. And I thought of Leo, standing in front of that academic hall, telling the world the story I had bled for. I'm not canceling, I said. The man's eyes cooled. Then you've chosen your own ending. The SUV slowed, and the door opened behind me. I stepped out onto a deserted stretch of dock, the vehicle already reversing away without headlights. Julian emerged from the shadows, looking at me like I crawled out of my own grave. Well, he asked, they want me to fold. Are you going to? I looked toward the city skyline, lights smeared by the mist. No. We started walking back toward the street. That's when my phone buzzed with a new text message. No number, just an image. It was Sadie, bound to a chair, eyes wide. The image stopped me cold. Sadie's wrists were tied with coarse rope, her mouth gagged, the dim background hinting at bare concrete walls. She was alive, eyes sharp, unbroken, but the fear in them was real. Julian glanced at my phone and swore under his breath, Hunter, this is leverage. They're telling you your time's up. I couldn't feel the wind anymore. My mind was already racing through possibilities. Empty warehouses, basements, abandoned municipal buildings. Sadie had worked records for decades. She'd know the sound of her own capture. If she left any clue in that image, I'd find it. I zoomed in. There, on the edge of the frame, a rusted water pipe with faded stenciling. Pierce Utilities Company. I hadn't seen that name in years. The city had contracted them back in the 90s to retrofit storm drains on the south side. They've got her near the industrial quarter, I said. Julian shook his head. You can't just walk in. If they're holding her, they'll expect you to trade something or someone. And they think the only thing I have left is compliance, I said. The thought that they might hurt her to force my hand ignited something I hadn't felt since my younger days, a cold, precise anger. We drove without headlights through back streets until the warehouses began to loom, hulking shapes against the night. Most were boarded up, but a few still had dim lights burning inside. I killed the engine 2 blocks away from where I guessed the pipe marking might match. Julian reached into his coat and handed me a small recorder. Get them to talk, he said. Names, transactions, anything that ties Leo to whoever's running this. I didn't ask why he carried it. Some habits don't need explaining. The building I picked had a side door with fresh scrape marks on the frame. Recent use. I eased it open and stepped into darkness that smelled of oil and damp concrete. A faint murmur of voices echoed from deeper inside. I followed, careful, until I reached a half-open door. Through the gap, I saw her, Sadie still bound, but sitting straighter now, watching 2 men argue near a folding table. I inched closer, recorder in hand, catching fragments of their words. Leo said, "Transfer's done, museum's clean." I pushed the door wider, just enough for it to creak. Both men turned toward the sound. One of them smiled slowly. Looks like the old man came after all. From the shadows behind them, another figure stepped forward. It was Finn. Finn looked different in the dim light. Shoulders squared, eyes colder than I'd ever seen in the museum. His tie was gone, sleeves rolled up, as if he'd finally stopped pretending to be the polite middleman. "Hunter," he said, almost warmly, "you should have listened when I told you to drop this." Sadie's gaze burned into me from across the room. I could see the faintest shake of her head, a warning not to make a sudden move. I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. "So it's you," I said, "the archivist who sells history one piece at a time." Finn smirked. "Don't be dramatic. I preserve history just in the hands of people who appreciate its value. People like Leo." At the mention of my son's name, Finn's expression didn't even twitch. He's useful. Ambition like his is hard to come by in your circles. And he doesn't have the baggage you do, ethics, sentimentality. He knows how to make the past pay. I could feel the recorder in my pocket, its tiny red light blinking. "So you framed me, stole the letters, and took the disc. All to what Sell it off to a private collection overseas. One that's already paid, he said simply. The two men flanking him shifted, and I noticed a dull gleam of metal at their waists. This wasn't going to be a negotiation. Let her go, I said, my voice low. Finn shook his head. Not until you make the announcement, public, loud, undeniable, that Leo's claim is legitimate. You got 1 day, Hunter. After that, he didn't finish the sentence, but his glance at Sadie said enough. I took a step forward, every muscle coiled. And if I don't... He smiled faintly. Then she disappears, and so does the last proof you ever existed in this field. The room felt too small, the air heavy with oil and dust. I glanced at Sadie again, looking for any sign of how badly she was hurt. She held my gaze, then flicked her eyes toward the far corner of the room, subtle, almost imperceptible. I followed the motion. In the shadows, just past a stack of crates, was a red metal box. A fire alarm. Finn noticed my glance and frowned. Careful, Hunter. One wrong move and... Before he could finish, the outside door banged open. Leo walked in, and he was carrying the disc. Leo's entrance changed the air in the room. He held the disc like a crown jewel, cradled in both hands, its carved surface catching the weak light from the overhead bulb. For a moment, no one spoke. Look what I've got, Dad, he said finally, his tone somewhere between pride and taunt. The centerpiece of my lecture. Thought I'd bring it here for safekeeping. Finn gave him a sharp look. We didn't agree on moving it. Leo shrugged, strolling further in. I wanted to make sure it wasn't misplaced. Too many hands in this deal already. I kept my eyes on him. Do you even understand what that is? Or do you just see the dollar signs? Oh, I understand perfectly, he said. It's the find that puts me in the history books. Under my own name. No more living in your shadow. Sadie's voice was muffled to the gag, but her glare was crystal clear. Don't rise to it. Leo set the disc on the folding table, letting it rest there like a centerpiece at an unholy banquet. Tomorrow, I stand in front of every academic and donor in the city and tell them how I uncovered it, authenticated it, and claimed it. And you... He leaned closer, lowering his voice. You'll be the proud father who confirms every word. Or, I asked, his smile was thin, or you lose your sister and your reputation in one afternoon. Finn stepped forward, clearly eager to end the conversation. We're done here. Hunter, you know the terms. Make the announcement, and you both walk out of this with your lives intact. I glanced again at the fire alarm. If I could reach it, the noise might draw attention from the docks, maybe even the police. But the distance was too great with two armed men watching me. Leo noticed my glance this time and smirked. Thinking about pulling something heroic? Don't. This isn't one of your lectures, Dad. No dramatic reveals. No applause at the end. Just consequences. His words hung there, daring me. Then, from outside, faint at first but growing louder, came the sound of an engine, big, heavy, and getting closer. Finn stiffened. We weren't expecting anyone else. The engine roared to a stop right outside the door. A moment later, the building shook with a single, echoing pound on the metal frame, and a deep voice called out, "Open up, now!" The pounding on the door echoed through the warehouse, each strike rattling the thin glass in the high windows. Finn shot a glance at the armed men, and they moved toward the entrance, hands resting on their weapons. Leo frowned, clearly nodding on whatever was happening. Who the hell is that? No one answered. The pounding came again, louder this time, followed by the same deep voice. Last warning. Open the door or we're coming through it. Finn cursed under his breath. Get that disc out of sight. One of the men snatched it from the table, wrapping it hastily in a black cloth. My eyes followed it instinctively, memorizing where it went, into a duffel near the wall. I caught Sadie's gaze. She was watching the scene unfold with sharp focus, her fear tempered now with something else, anticipation. The front door groaned as it was pulled open just a crack. A blast of cold night air swept in along with the silhouette of a man in a heavy coat. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Broad frame, close-cropped hair, and eyes that scanned the room like he already owned it. He wasn't police, I knew that instantly. Too casual, too certain. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, his tone carrying the kind of authority that didn't need a badge. "I hear there's an item here that belongs to my employer." Finn's jaw tightened. "This isn't your business." The newcomer smiled faintly. "It is now." His eyes shifted to me. "And you must be Hunter." "I am," I said carefully. "Good," he replied. "You're going to help me walk out of here with that disc. No one gets hurt if we keep it simple." Leo stepped forward, bristling. "The disc is mine." The man didn't even look at him. "Kid, the minute you took money from the wrong people, it stopped being yours." The two armed men looked to Finn for direction. He hesitated, torn between holding his ground and avoiding whatever storm this newcomer carried with him. And in that hesitation, I saw my window. The duffel with the disc was 3 steps from the fire alarm. If chaos broke, I could reach both. But before I could move, the man in the coat reached into his pocket and tossed something onto the table. It was a photograph, grainy, black and white, showing Leo shaking hands with a man whose face I recognized from the news. A man currently under federal investigation for smuggling. Finn's expression changed instantly. So did Leo's. And then the man in the coat said, "Everyone in this room has 1 minute to decide whose side they're on before the building fills with people who don't ask twice." The man in the coat let the photograph sit there like a live grenade. No one moved, but I could feel the air tighten the way it does before a storm breaks. Leo's eyes darted from the picture to Finn, then to me, as if I might somehow explain it away for him. "That's not what it looks like," he said, his voice cracking just enough to betray the lie. Finn's expression was pure calculation now, weighing the risk of staying loyal to Leo against the danger of crossing whoever the man in the coat represented. "You've brought heat here we can't afford," he told Leo flatly. The newcomer ignored their exchange and fixed his gaze on me. "Hunter, you got the cleanest hands in this room. So far. Help me secure the disc, and I'll make sure your sister walks out of here untouched." Sadie's muffled voice made a sound that could have been a warning. I understood. This man wasn't offering help. He was recruiting. And in his world, recruits didn't retire alive. Leo stepped closer to the table, his fists clenched. "Nobody's taking my discovery. Not you, not him," he jerked his head toward me, "and not anyone else." The man in the coat gave a soft laugh. "You still think you're the center of this story? You're just a courier who got greedy." The duffel with the disc sat in the corner, too far for a clean grab, but with every word they traded, the tension was drawing all eyes to the table and away from that corner. I shifted my weight toward it, slow enough not to draw notice. "If I help you," I said to the man in the coat, "I want something in writing, a guarantee." His smile was humorless. "Paper guarantees are for people who trust each other. We don't." That was my cue. I lunged toward the corner, grabbing the duffel in one hand and slamming my other palm onto the fire alarm. The bell shrieked instantly, echoing off the concrete walls. Chaos exploded. The two armed men drew weapons, shouting. Finn cursed and shoved past them toward the door. The man in the coat moved fast, but not fast enough to stop me from tearing open the duffel and getting my first real look at the disc in weeks. It was heavier than I remembered, the carved face staring back at me with its eternal, unreadable expression. Then, over the wail of the alarm, I heard something that froze me in place. Distant sirens, growing louder. The man in the coat smile returned, sharper this time. "Looks like we just invited a whole new audience to the show." The sirens cut to the warehouse air, a high-pitched promise that the standoff wouldn't last long. The man in the coat didn't flinch. He simply adjusted his stance, like someone used to working under pressure. Finn was the first to break. He darted toward a side exit, disappearing into shadows with the speed of a man who'd already planned his escape route. One of the armed men followed him, abandoning his post. Leo lunged toward me, eyes locked on the disc. "Give it to me, Dad." I pivoted, keeping the heavy artifact close to my chest. "You've done enough damage, Leo." The man in the coat stepped between us, shoving Leo back with one arm. "You're done talking. Both of you." Sadie, still bound to the chair, was using the commotion to rock herself closer to a stack of crates. I caught her movement from the corner of my eye, silently willing her to keep going. The second armed man was shouting into a radio, his words drowned out by the alarm. Red strobe lights flashed from the wall units, painting the room in quick bursts of color. Leo tried again, circling to my left. If the cops find you with that disc, they'll believe every word I say about you stealing it. The sirens were close now, maybe less than a block away. Tires screeched outside, doors slammed, and the sound of boots on wet pavement carried toward the entrance. The man in the coat didn't move from his spot. "Hunter, you can walk out of here with me and the disc, or you can explain to police how you ended up in the middle of an armed warehouse meeting. Decide now." My mind raced. Going with him might keep the disc out of Leo's hands, but would also chain me to a man whose definition of ownership was as corrupt as Finn's. Staying meant gambling that the arriving officers wouldn't arrest me on sight, or worse, believe Leo's version of events. The warehouse door burst open. For uniformed officers swept in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The man in the coat looked at me once, measuring, then started backing toward the opposite exit. "Last chance, Hunter." I tightened my grip on the disc, took a single step toward Sadie, and then one of the officers shouted, "Drop the weapon." It took me a heartbeat to realize he was aiming at me. For a split second, I thought the officer had mistaken the disc for a weapon. But then I saw his eyes not on the artifact, but on my other hand. I looked down. Somehow, in the chaos, a pistol had appeared there. Cold metal, unfamiliar weight. It hadn't been in my grip a moment ago. Leo's voice cut through the noise. "He's armed. He threatened us." His words were perfectly timed, laced with just enough panic to sound convincing. The man in the coat didn't miss a beat. He slipped through the opposite exit, vanishing into the dark, while every gun in the room swung toward me. "Drop it now," the officer barked again. I forced my fingers open, letting the pistol clatter to the concrete. It echoed too loudly, the sound of a trap snapping shut. Sadie shouted something through her gag, thrashing in the chair, but one of the officers moved to restrain her, mistaking her struggle for aggression. "This is a setup," I said, my voice carrying over the alarms. "That's not my gun. Someone planted it on me." The lead officer didn't blink. "Turn around. Hands on your head." I set the disc carefully on the floor, my mind scrambling. If they took me in now, Leo would have the stage completely to himself tomorrow. No counter-evidence, no witnesses, just his polished lie. As the cuffs bit into my wrists, I saw Leo standing in the corner, chest rising and falling with triumphant satisfaction. "Take the artifact into evidence," the officer ordered. Two others moved toward it. I caught Sadie's eyes. She was still struggling, trying to speak around the gag, her gaze flicking toward the far corner where the duffel lay. One of the officers reached for the disc, lifting it by the edge. That's when a deafening crack split the air, glass shattering above us. Something heavy crashed through the high window, hitting the floor between the officers and the disc. It was another duffel bag, and from inside it spilled a scatter of papers, dozens of them, each one stamped with Riley's signature and my handwriting. The papers scattered across the floor like leaves in a sudden storm. Riley's letters, my maps, the very trail that led to the ceremonial disc. For a moment, the entire warehouse froze. One officer bent to pick them up, his eyes flicking over the dates and signatures. "Lieutenant," he called, "you'd better see this." Another officer moved to cut the gag from Sadie's mouth. She coughed once, then shouted, "Those are the originals." Hunter's the one who found the site. Leo's been lying from the start. Leo's face drained of color. "She's making it up. Those are forged." But the officer holding the letters shook his head. "These are authenticated, dated decades before your claim." His gaze shifted to me, still cuffed, and then to the pistol on the floor. "Get those prints checked." The man who had cuffed me hesitated, then removed them. My wrist throbbed with returning blood flow, but I didn't care. I went straight to Sadie, untying the ropes, feeling the warmth of her grip as she stood. Leo backed toward the wall. "You can't prove I—" "Yes, I cut in, my voice steady now. I can." I nodded to the bagged man in the coat, head dropped. Inside, alongside Riley's letters, was a flash drive. Julian must have planted it. I held it up. This contains every transfer, every offshore payment you took to keep the disc out of the museum. You sold our history, Leo, for money you can't even spend in daylight. The officers closed on him. Leo's protest grew more desperate, his voice cracking as they read him his rights. Finn was caught 2 blocks away, trying to slip into a car that wasn't his. The man in the coat vanished for good, but his employers had lost their prize. By the time the disc was loaded into an evidence crate, bound for the State Museum under armed escort, the sirens had faded, replaced by the low murmur of officers giving statements. Sadie and I stood outside in the cool pre-dawn air. The horizon was just beginning to pale, the first light touching the wet pavement. "You got your lecture after all," she said quietly. I nodded, just not the one I planned. On October 13th, I stood on the stage at City Hall Auditorium, not as an accused thief, but as a historian with the proof in hand. The room was packed. Scholars, journalists, donors, and a dozen students leaning forward in their seats. I told them the truth, about discovery, about the ledger of debts we owe to the past, and about the cost of letting greed decide who owns history. The ceremonial disc was restored to the museum that week, displayed under a plaque listing both my name and Riley's. Leo didn't attend. By then, he was facing charges that would keep him out of any hall for a long time. As I left the stage to a standing ovation, I glanced toward the back row, half expecting to see the man in the coat, but the seat was empty. History never ties up all its loose ends. But that night, I'd pulled tight enough on the right ones to make the story ours again. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.